Welcome to the City of Charlotte, North Carolina's Community Recreation Center Development Project, Qualitative Risk Analysis Results. In markets around the country, the most in-demand building type isn't an office, it isn't even a school or a hospital. It's a multi-generational recreation center. These centers have been popping up everywhere, especially in the Midwest and Western states. After prolonged debates about funding and functions, the size and scope of these recreation centers almost invariably expand beyond the project's initial design plans to meet stakeholders' expectations. This project will build one of those have-to-have facilities for the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, located in the heart of Mecklenburg County. Over the past 15 years, recreation centers have evolved from an aggregation of gyms, sports courts, and small pools into hubs of the community and transition zones where people of all ages meet, exercise, relax, and learn, according to Zach Bizek. He's the AIA Lead AP Senior Associate and Quality Assurance Leader for Barker Rinker CCAT Architecture. That's a Denver-based firm that specializes in recreation center design, which accounts for more than 70% of its work annually. The City of Charlotte is now prepared to deliver the same high-quality multi-purpose recreation facility to its local citizens and guests who visit the city from the surrounding areas. This project will provide a state-of-the-art recreation facility centrally located for youth development initiatives such as the Mecklenburg County Boys and Girls Club. In addition, this new exciting and vibrant space will bring community residents together in a space that has never before been provided for the residents of the Queen City of the South, Charlotte. This is just one example of the beauty that a state-of-the-art facility brings to the local environment. A visually aesthetic architectural design brings a sense of awe, wonder, and joy for visitors as they approach the facility from a distance. State-of-the-art aquatic centers are springing up all around the country, providing a great place for kids and their families to play, relax, or exercise and spend some quality time just having fun with family and friends. These are just a few more examples of how creativity and planning can bring a miraculous structure to life for members of the community. You can see in the far left picture, we have a beautifully constructed architectural design. It's a brick building with a curved front building on the right corner. And if you take a look at the picture in the middle, you can see that's a state-of-the-art, multi-purpose, multicultural center that houses an aquatic center. You can see through the roof that the front building is an aquatic center, and the back building on the right-hand side is a gymnasium that probably houses a basketball court, a volleyball courts, and things of that nature. And finally, in the picture on the right, we see a beautifully constructed basketball court, gymnasium, where you can do all sorts of sports activities. So, how do we ensure that a project of this size is completed within scope and budget? We plan effectively and we manage the risks associated with successful project objectives. You can see from this slide that we've initially identified about 31 risks for the project team to begin managing so that all parties involved in the development activity, along with all other stakeholders, are pleased with the final results. In this presentation, we will present our initial set of risks and prioritize those risks using the Perform Quality Risk Analysis process as stated in the Project Management Book of Knowledge, or PMBOK guide. This slide shows that we've identified 4 opportunities documented in the project's risk register, and we've identified 27 negative risks, which we will call threats. They've also been identified and documented in the project's risk register. Perform qualitative risk analysis is in the PMBOK guide, chapter 11, section 3. Qualitative risk analysis is part of the 3rd step of the 6-step project risk management processes and is the process of prioritizing individual project risks for further analysis. So let's review the 6-step process of project risk management, and then we'll specifically take a look at step number 3. First step in the process is to plan risk management. This is where we define how to conduct risk management activities for the project. In this process, we specify where, when, and how the project conducts risk management. Process step 2 is where we identify risk. We identify individual project risk and sources of overall project risk, and we document their characteristics. This is an ongoing activity that occurs periodically during the project. Step 3, we perform qualitative risk analysis. This is the process of prioritizing individual project risks for further analysis or action by assessing their probability of occurrence and the impact as well as other characteristics. This is an assessment process, and it is an ongoing activity that occurs periodically during the project. The second part of step 3 is to perform quantitative risk analysis. It's the process of numerically analyzing the combined effect of identified individual project risks and other sources of uncertainty on the overall project. It's an assessment process, and it's an ongoing activity that occurs periodically during the project. Step 4 is plan risk response. In this step, it's the process of developing options and selecting strategies and agreeing on those actions to address the overall project risk exposure, as well as to treat individual project risks. This is done periodically after a risk has been identified. Step 5 is to implement risk responses. This is the process of implementing agreed upon risk response plans. This process is performed anytime after the risk has been identified, which ideally occurs during the project planning phase. A risk response can be any activity that mitigates or minimizes the probability of the actual event occurring. And finally, we have step 6, monitor risk. This is the process of monitoring the implementation of agreed upon risk response plans, tracking the identified risks, identifying and analyzing new risks, and evaluating risk process effectiveness throughout the project. This process is performed anytime after the risk has been identified, which ideally occurs during the project planning phase. This slide shows the nomenclature and technique that we have used to begin the process of analyzing each of our 30+ risks. These risks are stored in our risk register, and we utilize Microsoft Excel to assist with the process of analyzing and prioritizing those risks. The first item here shows risk action values. These are actions that we take against each risk. We either decide to avoid, mitigate, transfer, or accept the risk, or defer the risk for a later time, or exploit the opportunity if the risk happens to be a positive risk and not a negative risk. The second item on this slide shows us word and letter values with impact value examples. If a risk is designated as high, it has a high probability. We associate the number 9 with that probability of occurrence. If it has a medium probability of occurrence, we associate the number 5 with that. And if it has a low probability of occurrence, we associate the number 1 with that. Now, when we look at the probability of occurrence and match that with the impact that that event will have on overall project objectives, we multiply the numbers that I mentioned by the number associated with the impact. So if it's a high probability of occurrence and with a high impact, that's a HH. And we take a 9 and multiply it by 9 and get 81. If it's a high probability of occurrence associated with a medium impact, then that's 9 times 5, and we get a value of 45. And last but not least, if it's a low probability of occurrence with a low impact, that's a 1 times 1, which gives us the impact value of 1. So that's how we derive the impact values that you will see in our qualitative analysis table. Finally, we utilize a color-coded probability impact matrix to help us sort and begin categorizing the risks in our risk register. You will often hear the words probability and likelihood used interchangeably, and you will often hear the terms severity and impact used interchangeably. This slide shows that likelihood is the probability that an event will occur, and it also shows that severity is the impact that the risk will have on project objectives in the event that the risk occurs. The next set of slides will present all risks we've initially identified in the order in which we have prioritized them for the project. We will go fairly quickly through this list, and I'll explain some of the rationale behind some of the risks that may not be self-explanatory. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. The first risk that we've identified happens to be a positive risk, which we also call an opportunity. The opportunity here is utilize the Boys and Girls Club of America and the YMCA organizational model to build facility spaces and create programs. Essentially, what we're going to do here is just make sure we do our research of program development and their spaces that are required for a particular facility. In this particular case, we call this opportunity an exclusion. It actually does not affect any project development or any construction activity. So it has essentially zero impact on the developmental aspects of the project. However, if we look at operational aspects of the project, it will definitely affect that. So it's actually an exclusion for the development of the facility that we're talking about, or the recreation center. Item 2, the second positive risk is the fact that 67,000 Boys and Girls Club staff are available as resources. So we can take advantage of those resources so that we can understand spacing requirements for the various rooms that are required by organizations such as the Boys and Girls Club, as well as YMCA programs that are used for youth development activity. The third item that we've listed here is also an opportunity. What we're going to do is take a look at and research existing facilities. We've currently identified at least 4 similar facilities. The first one is Casa Grande Community Recreation Center. It's located in the city of Casa Grande in Arizona. The bottom of this slide actually shows that we have a total of 35 risks that we've identified initially. However, 6 of them are exclusions. They actually do not affect project scope, budget, or schedule. They do not affect either the schedule for developing the recreation facility. They do not affect cost or the project in any financial way, nor do they affect the requirements or the scope of the overall project. So we call those exclusions, and they are not actually important during the construction phase of the project. Another facility that we've identified is the Meadows Recreation Center and the Meadows Library. It's located in California, and then there's the Clearview Recreation Center, Library, and Multicultural Center. Both of these state-of-the-art facilities are in California. And finally, we have the Wayne K. Curry Sports and Learning Center located in the heart of Prince George's County, Maryland. These are all opportunities, so we will exploit the opportunity. As you can see here in the 3rd column, that's the action that will be taken on these risks or opportunities that we've identified, and we will research those to make sure that what we're building in the city of Charlotte is comparable, and we're taking advantage of all the lessons learned from the construction process of those facilities. This slide shows that item F is the inability to identify existing facilities with space that may require entire site construction. Essentially, what we're saying here is that if we do not identify existing facilities that can be remodeled, then we will construct our facility from the ground up. Item C highlights the third opportunity that we've identified from the 4 opportunities that I mentioned initially. However, it's an exclusion. Basically, it states that support from local businesses, such as in the case of California Water Services, for organizations in that area, they actually teach relevant topics to club members at their recreation facilities. So similarly, we will like to do the same things in the city of Charlotte, take advantage of local businesses, build partnerships with those local businesses, even though it's currently an exclusion for the developmental or the construction phase of this project. It will be vital for meeting operational objectives, and it will be very important at that time. So it's listed as an exclusion during the construction phase of the recreation facility, but we will keep it here so that we can maintain that for future reference. Item G, existing spaces and programs may currently address some of the project's objectives in disparate forms, such as the activities and the programs of the YMCA and other local recreation facilities. Basically, what we want to do is make sure we examine local university recreation facilities and existing local rec centers and understand those spaces, how those spaces are being used, take advantage of the lessons learned from those spaces, and incorporate those or that information into our design process. Next, item E is the inability to obtain funding. That would pose a major risk. However, we're going to transfer that risk to the project sponsor, which is the city of Charlotte, and we're basically going to just assume that funding will be made available to the project team. So it is not really a risk that the project team will incur. That's something that the sponsoring agency will look into and mitigate for the entire project. Next, negotiating with contractors and suppliers and city officials. This risk is basically governed by the contract that we decide to have for the builder or the subcontractors. We've actually decided to do design, bid, build, or a contract manager contract. So those particular contracts will actually govern the negotiating process and tactics for contractors, suppliers, and city officials. Next, site construction delays due to force majeure. That would be any natural disaster or any act of nature that causes the project to be delayed, affects the schedule in a negative way, and causes additional financial cost for the project. Item P, client misunderstanding of needs and scope of work. Sufficient sponsor research and strong communications with the designer, with the builders and contractors will help to mitigate this particular risk. So the goal is to keep communications high, ongoing communications, and just keeping the lines of communications open between the sponsor, the designer, the builders, the contractors, as well as the project team and the project manager. Next, poor technical knowledge in new areas. That risk will be mitigated by conducting sufficient research as well as providing training whenever needed for project personnel. Item S, approved processes. The approval process needs to be fully understood in order to mitigate any time delays that may affect the schedule in a negative way. Continuing on down the list, we have contract safety. That's self-explanatory. Primarily utilizing OSHA standards, Occupational Safety and Health Administration standards to maintain site safety awareness as well as procedures to ensure that accidents and incidents are kept at a minimum. Item W, drug use testing. We will make sure that we have testing standards in place so that any subcontractor or contractor employee can be tested at any time to ensure that the sites are safe. Human error. Obviously, human error is the source of problems for any particular contract. To mitigate this, we'll just try to make sure that all personnel are properly trained and that team members are alert at all times to just minimize any safety issues or any errors. Item L, diversity and ethnicity tolerance levels of Mecklenburg County communities must be understood and at respectable levels for project success. This is almost an exclusion, but we're going to keep it here so that the sponsor can continue to watch community relations so that there are no racial or ethnic tensions in the community that prevent successful operations of a recreational facility and positive interaction amongst community members. Community support is obviously a risk. We want to definitely have the support of the community. We mitigate that by ensuring that we're communicating with our community, having focus group meetings as well as town hall meetings just to keep the community informed of project activities as well as soliciting their input and their feedback as well as their needs for a facility of this type. So we want to definitely include the community so that we can maintain their support. Next, we have site security. That will be mitigated basically by ensuring that we have security available at all times. The Boys and Girls Club is a nonprofit organization that requires membership dues and donations for funding. This item has been identified as an exclusion because it does not affect construction activity for the facility. It only affects operational and programmatic issues, which will be in effect after the facility has been constructed. Health and safety processes. That will be mitigated obviously through OSHA standards and just ensuring that site personnel are utilizing standard processes and procedures to maintain the utmost safety. Next, we have sabotage, vandalism. Obviously, those would affect the project in a negative way financially, and we do want to avoid any type of litigation issues or any type of, we want to avoid having to use, what is it called, insurance liabilities. We don't want any liabilities incurred from sabotage or vandalized property. So we're going to ensure that we mitigate that by maintaining the best relationships with our subcontractors, our contractors, and the community and the people that will be in the area. Competing projects and competitive pressures. Mitigate any risks that may occur from those activities, competing projects. The ideal position to be in is to create a position of partnership with competitors so that we balance priorities and everybody gets a piece of the pie. Next, instructional facilities may have to resort to online options and virtual teaching due to COVID-19. That item, along with the next three items, have been identified as exclusions because they only affect operational issues as well as programmatic issues after the facility has been constructed. On to the last set of risks that we've identified. Sponsor misinterpretation of community needs without all facts available. That will obviously be mitigated by conducting sufficient research, having meetings with the community members as well as focus group meetings to make sure we understand their concerns. We lay everything on the table to make sure there are no miscommunications and just make sure that we have the input of the community. That will alleviate any misinterpretations or any misunderstandings between the local community and the project team. Security, community security, we mentioned that before. Next, misunderstanding of user expectations. Again, that will be mitigated through focus groups and town hall meetings. And last but not least, we have information security and national security. Obviously, we do not want to jeopardize anybody's personal information or the information of contractors or anyone that's on the site during the construction phase, as well as during the operational aspects of the facility. We will implement information technology security standards to make sure that all user information is properly protected, as well as protecting anyone in the vicinity and alleviating any national security threats that may arise in the future. So those are all down near the bottom of the project impact priority list. Again, we've listed the top priority items up front. Those primarily deal with conducting our due diligent research up front to make sure that we understand exactly what it is we're doing, what we're doing, how we're going to do it, and why we're doing it, and maintaining our focus and commitment to those objectives. That concludes the presentation. I'd like to open up the floor for any questions and discussion.